This is Open to Hope Radio, featuring Dr. Gloria Horsley and her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley, coming to you on behalf of the Open to Hope Foundation, dedicated to those who are looking for hope after loss. Now, here's Dr. Gloria.
Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host, Dr. Heidi Horsley. Well, we've got a great guest today, Heidi, and I know whenever we have somebody who's been involved with sibling loss, that's dear to your heart, right?
Absolutely, and she's been involved in a very deep level because she had a sibling that died. So, yes, it's important to me that the sibling voice is heard because so often it's not, and that we educate the world on what we as bereaved siblings are going through. So I am happy to have her on.
Well, Erika Barber, R. Barber, has some great ideas. She lived the first 15 years of her life as a sibling and has since lived as a sibling survivor. I guess Erika's 15 when her sister Andrea died at 20. And she's been working in the area of grief and loss and with families. And we're excited to have you on the show, Erika. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Now, we've got this great book, Letters from a Friend, a Sibling Loss Guide for Coping and Grief. Tell us what you're doing and how you happened to write this book.
Well, the book actually kind of was stimulated out of my own experiences with sibling loss. As you mentioned, I had a sister, an older sister, who had died when I was 15, and she was 20, so she was my older sister for a great part of my life. And I had to kind of reinvent myself after she was no longer there as my role model, and kind of figure out what that meant for me in my role in my family. And I looked to my sister for not only being a role model, but just kind of a support for myself when I was going through hard times in my life. She was my role model, my surrogate parent. And so her loss was devastating to me, and I had to kind of figure it out on my own after she was no longer there. So the book kind of stimulated a lot from my own experiences with grief, and I had several counseling experiences that offered me some insight into not only my own grief feelings, but how to release those. And it is also coupled with my experiences working with hospitalized children at Loyola University Medical Center. For several years, I was a child life specialist there and worked exclusively with the cancer population, the pediatric oncology population, and their brothers and sisters. And I was involved in a grief group there as well. So it's sort of a culmination of a lot of things.
It's hard to explain it because it's not your traditional book. It's a very large book, more, I would say a large coloring book size, and it has wonderful activities in it for people to do and for kids to do. And what I love about it, Heidi, is that Erika shares her own personal story, just snippets throughout the whole thing, because it's like, well, maybe you can give an example. Let me talk about some of the areas that I really liked. I got a chuckle when I got to grade your teachers on how you handled your brother or sister's death. I never thought about it, grading your because it is an irritant, the way some teachers treat you.
Sure, and that's just part of reassimilating back into a life without your brother and sister. I think especially returning back to school after a loss, particularly if that school knew your sibling as well. And a lot of people, and especially teachers and classmates, might not know how to communicate with you or relay their feelings to you, or even how to be your friend anymore. It's different for them too, and they're uncomfortable. So
you're speaking a little abstractly. I just want people to know that you actually say in the book, I felt like it was hard going back to school after my sister died. I love that, where you interject your voice in there for people.
Yeah, I try. That's kind of the intention of my story. You mentioned the snippets of it. There's just little pieces of sort of my feelings and my experiences, so that the author, who I really consider to be the siblings who are involved in completing some of these activities, can determine, what's a lot of times we don't know what's okay to say or feel, and I want them to know that everything that they're feeling and thinking is okay and is important. as well as
I really
like
the grading your teacher, Erika, because when I was 20 when my brother died, and I was in college, and I went back to college. I will never forget, I walked into a public speaking class, and my brother had been dead for 2 weeks, mind you, and the professor said to me, Heidi, you have to give your public speech today. And I said, well, my brother died 2 weeks ago, and I'm not prepared. And he said, well, it's been 2 weeks. You should be over it by now. And I stood up and said, my speech today is about how I am dropping this class because I should be over my brother's death after 2 weeks. And I walked out. And I would definitely have given that teacher an F. I love the whole grading idea because it's very empowering. And my mom and I were talking about that before the show. The activities you have in this workbook are very empowering. And we need to be empowered after a loss because we feel very much like victims.
Exactly. And I think you need some sense of control when it's something like so devastating as a sibling loss that you have no control over it.
Now,
so definitely.
Talk about decorating the location of your sibling's body.
Decorating the location or at the actual services?
Either way, either comes up for you. It's so creative.
Okay, sure. Within the manuscript, I wanted to give siblings some control and some involvement. And in the section that talks about services and ceremonies after a death occurs, some families practice wakes and funerals and rituals such as that. And I think it's that we include siblings if they want to be, and I think it has to be a choice, in the actual preparation of the services and the planning of what's going to be occurring there. And so, there's choices of what, maybe you want to select something special that means something to your relationship with your sibling to place in the casket if there is a casket, or with the sibling when they're going to be buried or interred somewhere. So having some involvement, I think, gives them, control and a different understanding and keeps them in the role of you're important too in this family.
How do you remember all the stuff you guys put in Scott's coffin?
I was just visualizing that. We had a pillow for his head, a little pillow that he had on his bed. We had, a football. I wrote him a letter. I mean, we had so much stuff. His Charlie Chaplin doll. We had
Charlie McCarthy.
What, Mom?
Charlie McCarthy.
Charlie McCarthy, that's it. And we had so much stuff, we thought that the casket was going to pop open during the service. we just put everything under the sun in there with them.
Yeah. Well, talk about decorating the grave if it's past and the siblings now don't have a chance to do that. How about going back to the grave, and what do you suggest for that?
Well, again, I think it's a place that you can visit with some intention and purpose, and maybe it's a place that you feel closer to your sibling, where you can bring a letter to them and read it to them. That was probably one of the more therapeutic activities. I think sometimes we don't get a chance to say goodbye and say the things that we wanted to say to them before they died. And the gravesite is a great place to do that. You can leave the letter somewhere near the gravesite. And again, if there's holidays or, different events, oftentimes there'll be decorations at the site. Siblings can make things and leave them there. So there's so many opportunities to still have a relationship in a way, even though that sibling is not a physical part of your life anymore.
Mm-hmm. And a sibling quilt, that reminded me of the 9/11. People made a lot of quilts for that, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they made a lot of life quilts. And I love the idea of using clothes, et cetera, to make quilts and just things to represent their lives. It's such a great way to keep everything. And I like the idea of the memory box where you said, I think something like you put things aside that you wanted to keep of your sisters, and that people could do that?
Oh, sure, definitely. I think in the memory box, and it doesn't have to be any extravagant box that you go out and have to purchase some expensive treasure chest, but I just kept a shoebox, and in it I kept, before she died, because she died a week before Christmas, and so she had Christmas presents purchased for me, and so the smaller items, I kept a little heart-shaped necklace that she had given me, bottle of perfume, and things like that. I think, the visuals and the things that we can hold in our hands, I think they're good things that help us reflect on our relationships and remember.
Erika, I love that she gave you the heart-shaped necklace because she does live forever in your heart.
She sure does. She definitely does.
I love that idea.
I was thinking about the tough things that people say, how shocking it was for you. And I love that you put in the book about that experience and say to the kids who are working on the book, how was it for you when you heard? Where did you hear? Or, giving them that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's important too because, a lot of times the way we're told, especially by adults, and if we're younger, I think things can kind of be ambiguous and unclear. Death isn't an easy thing to talk about. And so sometimes words are used that aren't really conveying the true meaning of what's happened. The terms aren't, she died, it might be, she's gone, or so you start questioning it. She's gone. What does that mean? She left? She's coming back? I mean, I think it's important to know and reassure adults that it's okay to use those terms of death and died and whatever the cause was of death. I think it's okay and important in the understanding of what's happened.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about, I was telling Heidi about that I was really interested because I, worked in nursing and I know when we have new little babies, we take their footprint and that kind of thing. But talk about leaving their mark. I thought that was pretty amazing if you had the chance to do that.
Yeah, I think, and it's one of the things too, because when I was working in the hospitals, that if there was some sort of period of time where we can anticipate a death happening, so there's a little bit of warning there, that we can actually make a print of the sibling's hand or foot. Oftentimes there's paint available in hospitals, and we sponge paint the hand or foot, and then just press a piece of paper up to it. We have that mark that we can kind of hang on to.
Heidi, I was thinking that's got to be one of the most powerful experiences for people being around.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great ritual. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to really tear your heart out when you're the person there with them, doesn't it? It's got to be an incredibly intimate thing.
It is, and it's really quite an honor when you're there and the family's relying on you and trusting you to be there with their dying child or their child who has passed. And I say passed, and I mean died, because it is important to say that. It's very honoring to be there and be that support resource for the family.
Wow. What about forgiveness? You have a nice section on forgiveness. Talk about that a little bit, because, I know that Craig Scott, whose sister Rachel was killed at Columbine, he had a fight with her the morning before, and it took him a year to finally deal with that and talk to his dad about it.
Sure. Yeah, forgiveness, there's so many levels when a sibling dies that can cause guilt. And I guess it's true with any death. When somebody dies suddenly, there's always the guilt of what was my last interaction with that person. And if it was not optimal and there was that kind of an argument or words said that you didn't really mean, I think that's hard to get over. And I think it's important that you try and find a way to forgive yourself.
You talk about survival guilt too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it's normal for no matter how our siblings died. What I find when I work with siblings is that we all have survivor guilt in some way. And, I know that when my brother died, I felt terribly guilty because there were 3 girls in the family and he was the only boy. And I felt like, you're the only boy who's dead. And would my parents be as sad if it had been me? Because there's some kind of irrational thinking that goes on. Sure, they would be as sad, but, it was the idea of, or why wasn't it me? Why was it him and why wasn't it me? He was my younger brother. So there was all these things that went on, and I realize now that survivor guilt is a normal part of sibling grief. Don't you think so, Erika?
I think it is. I think it's just another way of trying to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense. You're supposed to grow old with your siblings. They're supposed to be there for you for your transitions in life, and when something like this happens, whether it's expected or not, it's not fair, and you're trying to find out why.
Well, tell us a little bit about your Penpal program. I just told Heidi I think that's brilliant.
Well, the Penpal program, and I'm hesitant to get into too much of it, only because there hasn't been a really great response for it, so I haven't really pursued it to a great degree. Intention was to link up surviving siblings with each other. And obviously there'd be a screening process involved in that just for safety and security reasons. But hopefully by doing that, linking up somebody that can really hopefully understand the things that you're feeling and thinking at the time that you are in your grief process.
Well, thank you. And, I love the fact that you're honoring your sister and her name and keeping it alive and helping other people with your experience.
Thanks. That's that's my hope is for other surviving siblings as well, is that they keep that legacy going and make a difference with what they've learned.
You've been listening to Open to Hope Radio, hosted by Doctors Gloria and Heidi Horsley. Like today's edition, all of our past programs are available on demand at opentohope.com, along with helpful articles, videos, resources, and links to help get you through the toughest time of your life. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and sign up for our monthly newsletter. Again, that's opentohope.com. Check it out today. Then be sure to stop by next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we'll be posting another edition of Open to Hope Radio. Remember, others have been where you are. They made it through, and you can too, as long as you're open to hope.